Creating an order item requires locating a part by its ID. So in this lesson, I'm going to implement that feature. And there's two scenarios that I want to satisfy. First of all, I want to use a valid part ID. I want to call into, let's just call it the part service. It's going to perform the same type of functionality that the other services, the order service and the contract service does for us. And it should return back a valid part. And then obviously the opposite of that would be that if we give it an invalid ID, we would expect it to throw an exception. So we're going to implement both of those cases here in this lesson. Okay, so we start off by doing what? Right, with unit tests. So let's go ahead and right click and select add new item, and we're going to call this the part service test.cs. Great. And so what we want to do is I'm just going to go ahead and start plugging away at this. Let's say get part by ID, given a valid ID, should return a part. All right. So here we go. Var part service equals new part service. And we'll probably want to pass in a part repository as well. So I've got to figure that part out. And we'll do that with faking and such. Then we'll do part equals part service get by ID, giving it a valid part ID, and that'll be a const that I'll create here in just a moment. And then I'm going to assert a couple of things, that that what we get back is an instance of type. So part should be a type of the class part, which we've yet to create. And then we are going to go r equal. So we want the part ID equal to a valid part ID, since we passed that in. And then we want assert r equal. The price of the part should equal a valid part amount. A little too hard-coded for my taste, but we can come back and refactor that a little bit. So let's get some of these constants out of the way here, and we'll just do a private const string valid part ID equals valid part ID. Great. And then we want a private const double valid part amount equals, let's just say it's 50. Okay. And then I'm going to need to create a part repository too here at some point. And an initialize. So I'm just thinking out loud here, everything that I need to do. So let's go public void initialize. And we'll make this a test initialize attribute. And so we're going to need something called a part repository. So let's go private ipart service repository underscore part repository. Now I'm doing all of this in my mind based on what the pattern that we've already established earlier in this series, how we are going to work with Fake It Easy to and dynamically inject in the implementation of a repository at runtime. We're using Fake It Easy as a isolation framework to just isolate the domain layer. We don't want to really build out a part service repository. And so instead, we're just, I'm kind of following what I know I'm going to need to do eventually anyway, and I'm just kind of doing it all in one pass here. So hopefully this makes sense. And so we're going to say we want it to create a fake, and we'll go ahead and let it add that, a fake ipart service repository. We're going to need to go off and create one of those. And I guess that's probably good thing to do at the moment. So let's go ahead to our interfaces, and we're going to add a new class, and we're going to call this iPart service repository, and let's make that public. And I guess the only thing we'll really need to do here is it'll need to implement a method called getById. So it'll be a string. We'll send in a part ID, and it'll return a data transfer object called partDTO. So this should be actually an interface, not a class. All right, that's better. And we're going to need to go off and implement this partDTO. All right, and I'll go ahead and do it the long way here. partDTO. And well, for that matter, I need to add a part too. So let's go ahead and we're just slinging classes all over the place here, aren't we? So part. And so things are very messy right now. I probably should be a little bit more organized as I go through this. But honestly, my mind starts racing ahead, and I start thinking, okay, what do I need to do next? Part ID. And then double price. Great. And then pretty much, I think the partDTO, let's just make it exactly the same for now. So we'll just go and do like this, and then put a public here, and then public here. And I may come back to these modifiers. I'm not going to make everything in my project public, but at first it removes all the barriers for me working. I probably should start ideally private and then open it up to, you know, protected internal public as I need to, but I'm a little lazy sometimes, and I just automatically go to public. It's just like, blah, I don't want to deal with it. Okay, so do as I say, not as I do in that regard. Okay. All right, so now we have a let's go back to the part service repository there. Are you happy? You are now. Okay, we needed a using statement to get into our Acme maintenance domain DTO. So now anything that wants to be a repository has to implement this getById and return back a partDTO object. Got it. Very cool. We've got our partDTO. Great. We've got our part domain class. For now, that's quite enough. And so now we're back here, and we need to just make a reference to the interfaces to get the iPart service repository. And why aren't you showing up for us? iPart service repository, spelled it wrong. Good. Okay, and oh, I called it part repository, not part service, so that should fix that problem. Great. Okay, so we're getting closer here. Let's now wire this up so that a call to the part repository getById, passing in a valid part ID, would return a new partDTO, and let's go ahead and initialize it here, with a part ID equals valid part ID, and a price equal to, whoops, yeah, valid part amount. I like it. I like it. All right, and then, so we're good to go there. Okay, why are you not happy just yet? We have not created the part service. We've created all the pieces around it, but we haven't created the part service itself. So let's go ahead and add that in now. So we're going to add a new class called part service, and we're going to need it to have a constructor, I think. So public part service. And what are we passing in that constructor? Yes, an iPart service repository. So it knows what repository it's supposed to be working with, right? So part service repository. Thank you there. Let's go ahead and make sure that it has a using statement pointing to interfaces since we're using that. Great. And here what we're going to do is create a private read-only iPart service repository called part service repository. It will service all of our part repository needs. Very cool. And so then now we're just doing that equals that. So we're all wired up and ready to go now. Awesome. Very good. And now we need to implement a getById function because that's ultimately what we're trying to get to right there. That's our act right there. So public part getById, and we're going to expect in a string, and so var part DTO, and you know what, at this point, yeah, here. So let's start here. Service repository getById, passing in the part ID that we get. And now we're going to need to do that mapping thing. So var part equals new part, right? And then part ID equals part DTO dot part ID. And you're like, wait, whoa, we don't need to do that. We have AutoMapper. So let's get rid of all this. Let's go back here. And inside of our initialize, tell you what, let's go AutoMapper.mapper.map, and we'll say we want to go from part DTO to part. That should be all we need to do there since they have the same property names. We don't have to do anything custom. And then here we can do this. Var part equals AutoMapper.mapper. Whoops. That's not quite right. I picked the wrong method name. I think it's create map. There we go. That's what we needed. Create map between part DTO and part. Sorry about that. That should be a little better. So now we call map for our part DTO part. And boy, something is not happy. Why can't we do that? Oh, we need .dto. That should fix that problem. Great. And then we'll want the part DTO passed in. And now we're going to return the part. Yay. All right. There we go. Now, if you need a full explanation of this, just go back and review what we did with contract and the rationale of why we took all these steps to get to this point. Ultimately, we needed to grab a part out of a repository. I don't want to create the repository. I want to fake the repository. And I want this part service to interact with that repository. To do that, grab that object back, do the mappings, and just give me back a part that I can use here in my unit test. And why are you not happy here? Oh, I always forget this. I told you I do. There we go. Whoops. Do that. There. And now you should be happy. Yes, great. Okay. All right. Let's see where we're at here. I don't even know where we're at, what's broken. I'm just going to let the unit test tell me. I'm thinking I'm pretty close. Yes. So this get part by ID valid ID returns part is working. Everything's working. We got it all wired up. Admittedly, we went through this at a breakneck pace, but it all seems to work. Very cool. Now, we're going to go for broke here. And we're going to test the opposite case. So, almost everything is the same. Well, part of it is the same here. Let's copy that. Yes, I know. Copying, pasting is bad, bad, bad. I said you should never do that. But rules are made to be broken. And what will we expect if we typed in an invalid part ID? What do we want the part service to do? Well, we want the part repository. The part service will take the part ID and say, I don't know how to do anything with this other than to give it to the part repository. Part repository needs to look in its data store and say, I don't know what you're talking about. We don't have a part with that part ID number. I'm throwing an exception back up. I'm going to let it bubble up. So we would expect then this to be one of those expected exception situations with the type of, and we get to name it here. What do we want to call this? Part not found exception. I like that. We'll come back and implement that in just a moment. All right, so what we would expect here, we're going to pass in an invalid ID, and then we would expect it to throw an exception out. Why didn't I get any satisfaction there? I think it's exception, expected exception. Okay, they're named almost identical. It's a little tricky. Okay, but we've got it right now. That's the attribute we want. And so now we're going to have to go off and implement this part not found exception. So let's go over here to our exceptions folder. We're going to add a new class called, and this will need to be public before I forget that. It will need to inherit from both exception and iSerializable, right? And we want to import system runtime serialization. And so now it's just a matter of doing just that typing. I could probably get away with not doing that here, but I hate to leave things undone. I don't really need this, but I'm going to do it anyway. But I'm going to do something a little bit better this time. Try and save a few strokes. I'm just going to copy this 4 times, and then I'll just change the part that changes. So I don't know why I didn't think of that before. Okay. And then remember, this one was for serialization information. So serialization info, and then streaming context. So here we want to pass in info and context. Great. Awesome. And let's go ahead and let's test. Whoops, we gotta make sure we get the right using in here to add in Acme maintenance domain exceptions. And now let's go ahead and run it. Whoa, something's not quite right. What happened? Where do we have a problem? You know what we did not do? We did not set the expectation in here. So call to part repository dot get by ID invalid part ID should throw a new part not found exception. Is that right? Will that work? Let me just test it here. Okay, it works now. Awesome. So we just had to set the expectation. Didn't do that before. Okay, and I think that's all that I need to do. Now that I have the part and the part service and faked out a part repository, I think I'm ready to move on to the next step, move back to the to adding order items to orders. And that's a multi-step process. It's the core of the system, and we'll pick that back up in the next lesson. We'll see you there. Thank you.